Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the Finance and Budget Committee meeting for September of the Washington County Quorum Court to order. I appreciate everybody being here tonight. Good group out there. Justice Wilson has agreed to do prayer and pledge tonight. I'd like to just mention that Justice Ecke won't be joining us tonight after a sudden loss in her family. So when we're reflecting tonight, let's try to keep her in our thoughts and prayers too, to bring peace to her family through this hard time. Justice Wilson.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that we can assemble here tonight. We thank you for your presence. We thank you, Lord, that in your word you establish the institutions of family and government and the church. And I know that sometimes in our haste we get things mixed up about what should take what priority or what should oversee certain activities, but Lord, I know that your hand is over all, and I pray that we would never enter into any deliberations here, not tonight or not any other night, in which we don't acknowledge that you guide things by your hand, and we want to trust you to do that and ask for your wisdom as we proceed. We thank you, Lord, for every person who is here this evening and for every family that's represented. I pray your blessings upon them. We pray especially for J.P. Ecke's family at this time, that you might let them know of your presence and your comfort, and pray that she could be with us again soon. Pray also, Lord, that you would oversee the unfolding of events in our country. I pray that most of all we would seek to serve you, and that we would be good citizens by following your example. For it's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Justice Wilson. With that, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
I have a motion to adopt by Justice Lyons, a second by Justice Dean. All those, do you have a motion with it?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Judge. I move to remove item 9 from the agenda.
I have a motion by Justice Coger to remove item 9 from the agenda. Do I have a second? Second by Justice Ricker. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 9 has been removed from the agenda.
Thank you.
A motion to adopt the agenda as amended by Justice Lyons, second by Justice Dean. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The agenda has been adopted. We'll move into our monthly reports. First up is Director Tinsley with the Juvenile Detention Center report. Director Tinsley?
Good evening, Judge. Good evening to the County Service Committee members in the Quorum Court. Here's the monthly report for August 2024. This report reflects 30 days of data for the Washington Juvenile Detention Center. In the month of August, we had 24 intakes, with the average length of stay being 3.29 days. The average daily population for August was 16.68. The highest number of intakes were batteries 2, felony at 5. Of the 24 intakes of Washington County and Madison County, 14 were from Division 3 and 10 were from Division 8. There were 8 total transports, with 4 being performed by the Washington County Sheriff's Office and 4 performed by the Washington County JDC. Are there any questions that I may answer at this time?
No questions, Director Tinsley? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Judge.
Moving right along, next up is the Sheriff's report. Sheriff Cantrell. I believe you're all aware, but Sheriff Cantrell's offered us a new handout here, if you see that in your stack.
Thank you, Judge. Yes, we inadvertently submitted our activity report with the wrong date range, so that's the one that's in your packet, and I've passed out a current one that reflects the report that should be in your packet. So you can see our calls for service are fairly consistent with last year. Detention intakes, so we're 935 for this reporting period. Keep in mind, this reporting period's July 16th through August the 15th, and sent fewer to prison this month compared to a year ago. Average high count still about the same, so still have 526 our average pretrial count. So for the month, and that number doesn't seem to be moving much, still staying 500 or more. So that's our report. Be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Sheriff? Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. Yeah, Sheriff Cantrell, could you update us on the staffing at both the detention and the enforcement divisions?
Enforcement section of our office is 11 short. Our communications division is 3 people short, and our jail is 31 short.
31, okay. Could you update us on the construction at the jail for the new safety measures that were approved a few months ago for safety glass and all that?
We determined that project was above the threshold for doing it without an architect. So we have, there's a $250,000 cap, a state requirement that's anything over $250,000. So we've put a request for qualifications out for an architect service, and have selected an architect, and they've, I don't know if we've signed the contract, but we have an architect identified to help us with that project. It's going to be small, but it did go over that $250,000 threshold, which the state law requires. So
Okay.
that's where we're at. We haven't started construction yet, but we hope to in the next few weeks.
Okay, what about the COVID numbers at the jail?
COVID, well, interesting. She's asked. We're in a congregate setting, so 1 or 2 COVID cases can expose a lot of people. So I did just on September 1st, I had 3 positive COVIDs and 50 in quarantine. On September 5th, I had 3 positive COVIDs and 49 in quarantine. Today, I have 1 positive, and well, I can't use that number. Let's see, it's 107 minus 33, so I've got about 70 in quarantine today that have been exposed, and they're in isolation, waiting for the quarantine period to end. Hopefully none of those will test positive, and they can move on into general population.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sheriff? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Judge.
Next up is the Treasurer's Report. Treasurer Hill?
Thank you, Judge. Evening, Court. Go straight into 6.1, Treasurer's Summary. August, like most of the summer months, isn't great for revenues for the county. Look at the first line, 1,000 general, 3.3 million went out as expenditures, and only 1.6 came back in as revenue. Likewise, road had 1.2 million in expenditures and just under $1 million in revenue, and jail was the same. It's expenditures over revenues. Bottom of this report, we began the month with 100 million in the bank, ended the month 98 million in the bank. 6.2, the county general property taxes. We received 478,000 in August. That's up just a little bit from last year, but for the year, we're up 9%. See, 6.3, ARPA report. Not a lot of activity this month. And we ended the month 14,338,000 remaining in that account. 6.4, the 1 cent sales tax. We received about 925,000. That's 3.5% better. This is the best month we've had since April. Just FYI for the court, it looks like Springdale has annexed 140 they got some land, and so our population dropped by 140. from the 2020 census, and that drops our percent from 16.47 to 16.41. That's about 35 to 40,000 a year due to that annexation. 6.5, quarter cent jail tax. 1.4 million came in, almost 4% increase. And for the year, that's 230,000 over last year at the same time. Finally, 6.6. These are my preliminary 2025 revenues. And I do stress preliminary, so carryover numbers are always tough this far in advance, so be cautious when you're looking at these. Let's see, because the numbers can and will change over the next couple of months. And there's a lot of numbers here. Please email me if you have questions, or call me, or whatever you need to do. I'm there. That's all I got.
Questions for Treasurer? Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. Treasurer Hill, I see the item 35, line item 3525 is now zero. That's the ERA 1 funds. Can you tell us what happened and how that money is, where that money went?
It went back to the federal government.
How long
We
ago
wrote a
was
check
that?
and sent it back to them.
How long ago was that?
I can't remember if it was the 1st of August or last of July, but I can send you information if you need it,
But it's gone.
sometime around there.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Additional questions for Treasurer Hill? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Employees Insurance Report, Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Judge. Good evening, Court. Well, we'll jump into your cash flow report. I can tell you that we continue with a high percentage of utilization for our employees. It's not something that's this year's claimants being driven by one or two people. We started out the year with some high claims on a few individuals, but as the years persisted forward, our percentage of employees using the plan has just continued to go up. So you'll see the medical claims for the month of July were right at 640,000, while the drug claims were at about 246,000. This comes to total claims paid of 886,000. And that's before our fixed cost, which is, our stop-loss insurance, paying our TPA, renting our network, et cetera. So our total cost for the plan after we pay those fixed costs was $958,000 with funding of $468,000. So this was a very high utilization month. We did get bailed out some by receiving a pharmaceutical rebate of $222,000 for this month. But if you'll look down where the expected claims, kind of in that yellowish highlighted section in the middle, we're at 132.55% of expected claims year to date. As we've discussed before, once the year is concluded, the aggregate stop loss would kick in at 125% of expected claims. So we would look to, if we continue this trend, we would look to regain some of this money. Just so that everyone understands kind of how aggregate stop loss works, we have a 90-day run out at the end of the year to make sure that claims from hospitals and providers have come in. Blue Cross then pays those claims for us after the discount's applied. And then anything over that 125% there, they would true up and give the county back that money, probably around net 30. So we could consider April 1st kind of a date to get true up from our aggregate stop loss.
Justice Simons?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Angel, hitting your aggregate stop loss is kind of a bittersweet thing. It's nice to hear money's coming back, but that usually puts us in a pretty tight situation when it comes to renewals. And where are we at with Blue Cross Blue Shield or the provider? I mean,
Yes, sir.
Are we looking at, we're probably too far out to think about renewal.
Not as far as you would think, and you're 100% correct, Justice. It's a double-edged sword. It's nice to get some of that money back from the insurance company, but that goes into those fixed costs that we talked about. So when their underwriters look at these things, that's That's kind of how they determine what our rates are for the next year. And we almost certainly will receive a rate increase. Thankfully, we kind of dodged a little bit of a bullet on this month because the data that they're using to give us our renewal stopped in June. So those July numbers, again, aren't off the board, but they'll hit us next year. But we won't have to look at it as much this year. But even before these came in, we were running 123, 124%. So I would expect a rate increase. We're hoping to get those numbers in within the next week or two and be able to meet with HR, the comptroller, judges, staff, et cetera, and kind of look at what options we have. We've reached out to every major carrier and stop-loss provider. Obviously, Blue Cross has done a great job, but we just want to make sure we know what's out there. So we've reached out to the United Healthcare, Cigna's, Qual Choice, as well as some other stop-loss providers, just to see if make sure we're getting the best deal.
And that was my next question is, are we looking at just a renewal or are we looking at remarket?
No,
It's a
we
hard
never
market.
look at just renewal, even if we think we love Blue Cross, we're not going anywhere, just to make sure we're there and use those other carriers to sharpen the pencil. But I think we're in a wide open year looking at this, so we have turned this out to all carriers.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Angel? Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
All right, next up is the Comptroller's report. Comptroller Sherman?
I think I might be up here for the long haul, so. Okay, on that, we'll get the first reports out of the way, but this is the one you guys should be looking at. We're 67% through the year, so I didn't see anything that sticks out on me of overspending, so we're good. The general fund is actually at 59, so we're doing real good as far as spending this year for what we budgeted. Is there any questions on this report? Then to the second report, the unappropriated reserve balance should be this one. Those are just the ordinances that you guys voted on and passed over the last 2 months because we didn't have a finance committee last month. So they were all just relatively small. The roads there for 277, we got some sort of refund from the state, I think, on an overpayment. And then they wanted to spend that money, so we were getting it out of unappropriated reserves. And then down there on the radio system sales tax, that program is about done. I think we have like one more payment of about $450,000 that we're making to Motorola, and then we will have a small balance left in there, probably about $450,000, $500,000. And I'm not sure, Councilor Lester, you might be able to tell us if can that go in county general, or does that have to be spent?
No, that money's earmarked. It can only be used for the radio system. And so there are some other things that have to be done. One thing we're looking at, we've got to decommission some of our old towers since we were onto some new towers, and so there's some things like that will happen. But any money that's not used will have to stay in that account. It can only be used for that purpose.
Is there any questions on that report? Really, that's just the ordinance.
Justice Fleming?
I just want to ask Brian a question. They will be tower rentals come to us from now on. Can that money be used for that?
Yeah, that money can be used for that.
Okay,
I mean, it can be used for anything that relates to that system.
to the radio system?
Yep.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Comptroller?
Am I up next on the budget, or?
I think we're gonna move to the resolution, and then we're gonna do that on item number 11. So you got the wrong hall in the wrong spot. Don't drink too much of your water. Next up, we're gonna move into our unfinished business. Item number 10 is a resolution to enhance transparency in resolutions. Counselor, would you like to introduce this and give it a little background, and then we'll let JP Bowerman speak to it? Oh, you want to lead JP Bowerman? You want to introduce it, or?
So at the request of JP Bowerman, we looked at making a few changes, and these are just some suggested changes that I kind of looked at and put together based on some of the concerns that the quorum court had when this resolution came out. As you can see, we're changing it to an ordinance instead of a resolution. There are a few, kind of changed some wording on that to try to give some more clarity. And I also added in towards the end, Article 5 and Article 6 should be underlined as well, see that it's not. Kind of a way that the quorum court, which you have the power to do anyways, could move forward a resolution if it did not conform, to this, if there was a reason that you felt that it was necessary, an emergency or something. This only applies to resolutions because that's all J.P. Bowerman's ordinance initially applied only to resolutions, so I didn't change that. I have had some questions about why it doesn't apply to ordinances as well. I would caution you on getting into something like that. We start splitting hairs on, well, what has to be, if we have an ordinance like we'll have coming up that says we have X amount of dollars in a fund, well, how do we know? We want documentation of that. And so we really start grinding government even more to a halt if we start looking at making everything we do, every document, every dollar figure that we put out somehow has to be cited, and there has to be some sort of documentation for that. So those are just things I would consider on this, and ultimately it's up to this court. Your other option, in lieu of this is to say, if somebody has a statistic in a resolution or an ordinance and can't cite me where it is, then I'm not going to support it. That's your choice too, each individually. So I'm just, I don't get a say or a vote, and I'm neither here or there. I'm just saying, before you think to start taking this too far forward, I do want to caution you that could be big time problematic for us in just regular appropriations and things like that if we get too much into that. So,
Debate or discussion? J.P. Bowerman, you want to speak to it or open it for debate?
I would just say that, the whole spirit of this ordinance is just to be, is just to trying to speak to the fact that, just having transparency in everything that we're doing, trying to be as open and forthcoming. We know there's a lot of misinformation that is given today in a lot of society, and we just want to be proactive in avoiding that. And I just feel like this is something that helps to do that. So that's the whole spirit behind this. Now, if it's seen as too onerous or something that would be something that would really hinder government, I wouldn't want that, but I would like to see transparency in all that we do. Not inferring that we don't have transparency now, just that, making sure that we're emphasizing that, so.
Absolutely. And I think if we move forward any further, we should entertain a motion on the items. Unless, Justice Lyons, you want to speak to it? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I just have a question. Article 2 talks about citations shall follow the standardized format, clarity, accessibility, and with a minimum of the following items here. Where is that format going to get identified? How does it get identified, and how does it get provided out so it's being followed if it's not in this ordinance?
Counselor, would you like to?
sure. Well, so I think the intent here is that it just, to ensure that there's some sort of, not any particular format. There's a lot of different formats. When we start talking about formats, we get into a plethora of different formats, right? So the intent here was to say that the citation follow a standard format, and that at a minimum it contain the things that are listed here. And so as long as something's cited and to the extent possible the things listed here are included, then that would be fine. Again, that would be something that the quorum court would have to come in and say, well, I see that there's a publication date, but there's no author, there's no source title, or other identifier. You could then say, I'm not gonna support this because it doesn't have the right sites. And we could get into the what ifs, but I tried to keep this just so that it says any kind of standard format, regardless of how you want to format that, whether it's a footnote, whether it's a, some other kind of site.
Any standard format that's acceptable in
Right, right.
And whatever, I mean, we
And-
go
and
out,
includes-
here's a format standard that we can use, we're not gonna specify one. It just needs to be
Correct.
a common one that's used in literary purposes or,
And
whatever.
it
purposes.
includes
Okay.
this, at a minimum, these things, a source title, an author,
Right.
publication date, and then a URL or other source identifier, you know, if there is some. So if it's a website, we have that,
Okay.
that's listed in there.
Further discussion? Justice Washington?
Thank you, Judge. So I understand the intent of this, and I think that part is great. I'm just concerned, particularly when I look at Article 3, and it says that the quorum court justices are responsible for verifying the accuracy and reliability of the sources. And how do we do that? So do you make sure that it's a scholarly source? For some people, Wikipedia is accurate to them, and I just think that we're gonna open up a can of worms here where how do you really evaluate whether or not the source is accurate and it's reliable? I just think that this is gonna create more work for people just to introduce a simple resolution. So once again, I do understand the intent behind this. I understand the spirit of this, but I think that we're going to go down a road that we really don't need to go down just for the sake of being able to introduce resolutions.
Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. Yeah, I have just, I'd like some clarification on some things. I noticed that, I went back and looked at the last couple of resolutions that we've passed. One was mine for the Northwest Arkansas Community Correction Center. And when I drafted that ordinance, I did have a citation where I cited it had the lowest reincarceration rate. But then when I looked at the resolution that was filed, it wasn't on there. So, and I didn't notice that at the time. So would that be a good example of how we're supposed to do it then? Because I cited the ULR and the link to the final PDF at the Arkansas Department of Corrections. Would that be considered a good citation?
Are you
Counselor
talking
Lester?
about, you're talking about based on this, if this were passed, would that have been? I mean, the ULR or URL would have had to have been included, but also the author, I mean, who wrote it, the date, publication date, those things. But yes, ultimately, that would be what this ordinance would require, is that be cited in the ordinance or the
Okay.
resolution.
Okay, thank you. So, and then the other resolution that was passed was by Justice Wilson about D-Day, and for instance, it says in there that, and thousands of Americans working in a supporting role both at home and abroad. How would we verify that? I mean, that's just like a common fact.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, I think that's kind of what my concern here would be on this, which is also why I added, you know, should you want to go forward with this, I added some language that says, hey, you know, maybe it's something it's common knowledge, so it's okay if we don't cite it, that sort of thing. You get what I'm saying? I mean, I wanted this to be, I wanted to make sure that this resolution or this ordinance didn't like stop things, you know, that there were workarounds without somebody saying, well, we're not following the ordinance, so we just can't do it, you know, and the example that came up to me is we get ready to honor somebody that's 100 and something years old, and we're told they're the oldest living Arkansan, and we do a resolution because they're in Washington County. Well, what do we have to provide? A birth certificate? Do we have to somehow, how do we prove? I don't think that's the intent of what we're doing, right? So I think if you look at Articles 5 and 6, that kind of addresses those things where we're going, well, it's a common fact. And so maybe we don't need to cite that. But if it's not a common fact, then this is the format for the citation. But I think, you know, your question, or I think J.P. Washington's Article 3 was, you know, Article 3, and this was originally in J.P. Bowerman's ordinance, it's incumbent upon the quorum court members to ascertain whether or not that you know, statistic or site is correct or not. So, I mean, it's not like it's incumbent on anybody else. You come in, you either say, I checked it or I didn't, I don't care. That'd just kind of be up to you all, because only you can make that decision.
Okay, one more, another question is, And be it further resolved that the county clerk is directed to distribute copies, da-da-da. Are we good with that we can direct the county clerk to do that? Because last year that was an issue.
That the county clerk distribute copies of the resolution to all the JPs?
That the quorum court is directing the county clerk to take action.
Yeah, I think the quorum court coordinator could probably do that, and make sure, I mean, you all get copies of everything. I think Dave sends out file mark copies of everything to all of you, correct? So I think or not file mark, but final copies of the ordinances, I don't know, no. I mean, I think that's something that you could request, and certainly something we'd be willing to do, so that it's not on the county, not incumbent upon the county clerk.
But this says that the county clerk is directed. We're directing the county clerk to do something. Can we do that? Because last year when I had my ordinance for publication of ordinances and resolutions, that was a big issue.
Arguably, no. Arguably, you couldn't do that. You're right. I know that there's been some back and forth, and there's some different legal opinions on what you can direct and what you can't direct. So that's up to you. You know, I can only give you, I can say, hey, you can't do that, and then if you want to do it, you do it. I mean, that's about all there is to it. But certainly that's something that could be removed. I mean, this will be published, and it will be a public record. It will be housed in the county clerk's office for anybody that wants it.
Okay, thank you.
Justice Ricker?
Since resolutions are basically non-binding at all, do you, either Mr. Lester or Judge, y'all have an idea how many that we do in a year's time on an average guesstimate?
We're up to about 8 right now.
Okay, so about 8 or 8.
I mean, I think it varies quite a bit, but yeah, I mean, we could get you those statistics.
No, I'm just curious how many we do. Because you don't want to burn up a whole lot of time that we could be taking care of business on something that's non-binding. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Justice Rio Stafford?
Thank you. So just hypothetically, let's say I wanted to bring forward a resolution congratulating the Olympic athletes who have lived or worked in Washington County, which is actually something that I've been thinking about doing and hope to work on soon. Would it be sufficient for me to cite a news article that lists something like that, or would I need to go, like, how would I cite something like that?
We could sit here and beat this and hypothetical it to death, but I know we do that as attorneys. That would be up to you.
Okay.
And to what your fellow JPs felt like was adequate. That's why Article 3 says it's incumbent upon each one of you to check the reliability of what that is. Yes, we can all sit up here and say, well, 4029, I don't believe anything. No offense to 4029, I'm picking on you. I got a voicemail from 4029 as we were sitting here earlier, so they were on my mind. But I mean, you know, you could say that about anything, you know, but that would, again, I think the intent here is to let that be up to the court, and it all goes back, and I said this to J.P. Bowerman. The other way to do this is to say, hey, I don't believe what you've got in this resolution. I can't support it. We want to table this until the next meeting until you can get me some data or cite me something or something like that. I mean, this is all up to you. You all can do whatever you want to on this. This was, you know, it's your ship, so you steer it, you know, however you want. But you're right. There's certainly, we could come into all sorts of hypotheticals and start splitting hairs on a lot of things.
I guess my other question is, have we had an issue? I can't think of one. Have we had an issue recently that this is solving?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
not aware of one, but I didn't, and you know, that would be a question for whether JP, but I think he said he didn't see an issue, but he just wants to make sure that.
Going forward, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Justice Lyons?
Did you want to answer that, or?
That's fine.
Okay.
That was a good answer.
So I think overall, it's incumbent on all of us, regardless of the ordinance or not, to validate the data that we're looking at. I think we all do that, right? We look at it, we get it, we go look it up. I agree, it would be nice if we understood the reference that the individual drafting it got it from. It'd make it easier to go look at that and maybe look at some other views to see how they all come out, because, you know, references are references. Some are good, some are correct, some miss the mark. And I think it just becomes incumbent upon all of us just to, we've got to make our own decisions on that. And it's a little hard to make an ordinance to direct that. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of good points. I think the biggest point coming home is the amount of time that we spent just discussing this. Is that going to multiply with every resolution, creating us not to get to the business we need to get to on something that's very hard to make an ordinance out of? I think it just becomes human nature, and we all have to own up that we need to do it. And if we're given a reference, you know, be considerate of everybody out there to provide it so they can go look at it and make their own judgment moving forward. Thank you.
Justice Wilson?
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate everything that's been said. I think everybody here is wanting to do the right thing by this. I'm still generally approving of such a measure because it kind of holds all of us more accountable with the information that we might present, and that's a good thing. But I also kind of feel like if we were to pass an ordinance like this, that it should be understood that this is something that kind of hums in the background. It shouldn't be the driving force behind any time, you know, behind any resolution that we might enter into. And it's been alluded to tonight that certainly we don't want it to be something that we just shut down a resolution on a technicality. I don't think it's intended at all to be used as a weapon, and we'd want to avoid that. So I just feel like there should be some restraint. I think if we do introduce, any one of us introduces a resolution, there are times when some citations would be appropriate. Because, I mean, in good faith, when we present information to each other and to the public, a citation kind of subtly implies that I've done some homework on this and we're not just peddling, you know, rumor, hearsay, innuendo, gossip. You know, this is not just something that we came up with. So I think that certainly citations have their place, and for that reason, I'm not against it. I just feel like it's something that it should be something that helps us to facilitate things in good faith, and certainly not something that is that turns into a club that we could just batter a resolution with. I don't think anybody here wants that anyway, but I wanted to mention it. But thank you.
Justice Pond?
Yes, to make sure I'm not, or that I'm still on the same page, we're still talking about a resolution. We're not.
No, sir, I believe the resolution was what was originally submitted, but Councilor Lester had a handout this evening with some red lines in it that switched it to an ordinance.
And you have changed it to an ordinance. Okay.
I mean, it's not different in the agenda. So, you know, we're gonna have to make some decisions here on what actions we take underneath our parliamentary procedure, and so this would be essentially, I'm taking it as a motion to amend what's in front of us in the agenda packet.
Okay, I see now, I see where, thank you.
Any other comments or debate? Oh, Justice Wilson?
Question to clarify, and it goes back to the previous question. This is, what we're discussing now is an ordinance that would only apply to resolutions.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Okay.
That's correct, sir, yes. So now we have to dispose of the item, and so we've taken some liberty here of debating this without a motion on the table, and I think that's great. We've had some good discussion, but now do we move forward with this? This is up to the pleasure of the court of motions here.
So when I did this, I changed it. There was a lot of questions surrounding it being an ordinance and not having teeth, and then a resolution that says shall, and as you know, resolutions aren't binding. So this was just kind of a draft that we could do. You can do this several different ways. You can just kill it all together tonight and say, you know, we don't think this is necessary. We want to vote it down. If you would like for me to draft something that is a resolution that is more of, hey, we, you know, resolve and, you know, encourage JPs when submitting resolutions that they cite data if it's available and that it be in this format. Or you could go forward with the ordinance. It's really up to you. The reason that the reason it is the way it is in the agenda is because a motion was made to refer this back to committee, and it's referred back in the form in which it exists at the time. And so that's why it didn't change in your agenda, because it can't. We can't change those things without quorum court approval. So we can only submit to you an amended version. And you're welcome to change that amended version however you want. So there are some options here based on kind of whatever is the pleasure of the court, so to speak.
Justice Bowerman?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to withdraw this, this ordinance. Is that possible?
Councilor
Is
Lester?
your intent to kill this altogether, or is it to revisit it?
No, just to kill it. I think that we've all been stating basically the same thing, that we all want clarity in our resolution of what we're saying. I think that the spirit of that is what this was speaking to, but obviously the implementation of this is much more complicated and can be much more far-reaching than what any of us would probably like. And so, given all that, I think the best option now is just to encourage, you know, my fellow JPs to follow that idea of you know, citing things when you can as much as possible, because it does really help, and it does make it much clearer where you're coming from, and it helps us to understand your position a lot better. And I think if we adopt that mentally and we apply that, then there's really no need for this resolution or this ordinance at this time.
I think the more appropriate thing would be to suspend the rules and remove this from the agenda.
Okay.
A motion?
Then I motion, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I motion to suspend the rules and remove this from the agenda.
I have a motion to suspend the rules and remove from the agenda by Justice Bowerman, second by Justice Lyons. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? This item will be removed. Item number 11. If I can find my agenda. I've lost it. Item number 11 is we were going to bring up tonight. It's a discussion item with Comptroller Sherman and our team here about we're going to do a budget summary, and then we're also going to go into the proposed compensation plan we've been working on for a few weeks. So, Comptroller Sherman. All right, hit the button on the very right, sir. There you go.
So we're just starting the budget process, and one thing that I want to make sure this year is that you guys are all educated on how the budget is put together, the items in it you want to see, all that kind of stuff. So this is just a really initial discussion, showing you what I'm looking at. We will email you a version of the giant spreadsheet you saw last year, but it's not as complicated. We took out a lot of the colors and then took out a lot of the sheets, but there's still the salaries in there and overall budgets from every department that you can go to, and we can educate you on how to get back and forth and look real quick at that. I'm willing over the month to come to every individual if you want to talk about the budget in depth and brief you on what I think the budget is and go from there. So I don't want you guys getting the budget in November and still not knowing what's in it. So I really want to educate this year. Part of that is where we stand financially as a county. So one thing that I think this county is fiscally strong. That's partly because of you guys' work. Some of it has to do with the federal and state aid that came in over the last couple years. basically, there was a surplus ran for 4 straight years. Most of that money is still in the bank, and it's going to be used, some of it's going to be used this year, but we do have a decent-sized savings account, too. So that's first. You know, I know the treasurer sweats when I talk about projections, but I looked at the revenue through June. It was 55 million. A lot of times, you know, the majority, the bigger half of our revenue comes in the second half of the year because of property taxes due in October 15th. So that's when people start paying. That's our big months, is September, October, and November. So I think that it's going to end up around 110 to 115 million, which would be about 10% growth over last year. If you look at our property taxes year to date, the treasurer showed you today, it's up 9.2%. One thing that I would like to point out, I talk to Assessor Hill a lot and talk about revenue, because as we grow, we sort of need to know how the revenue is going to flow. So you can see some of the figures on this. This is one that I passed out when I got here, and it's called Fiscal Facts and the 25 Budget Process Discussion. So there's $40.6 billion worth of property and taxation that we do on property tax around here. New construction was 1.29 million. These are 2023 numbers you see right there. So those are the increases, like 70% increase on residential. There was a 70% when they reassessed in 23. That was over 20. So he's going to reassess again in 26, which those numbers will probably bump again. Talked to him today. He told me that the 2024 figures right now on new construction in Washington County is 1.25 billion. So the point of all that discussion is our revenue is going to grow, and we probably need to grow as a county a little bit, and you know, keep up with the infrastructure and you know, size and everything. Our missions will require more. Just all around. Sales tax, you see there, it's relatively flat until this last month. It's up 2.2%. Not really sure why it's flat, because you would think if everybody's moving in, you know, they're claiming that 500,000 people more will be here by 2035. We had talked to Assessor Hill. He was talking, you know, some of the increased cost in other areas, just like property tax, might affect them spending on other things that aren't taxed, you know, that are essentials. They're spending their money on that we might not get tax revenue. So it's sort of flat. We're hoping that goes back up. Now, that's surplus of the general reserve fund. I know a lot of people focus on the unappropriated reserve when we do the budget, but really that 14.9 million, that is a true savings account. That is not dedicated towards anything. That, I believe, was done via ordinance about 2 to 3 years ago. So that is our true surplus, is 14.9 million that we have in the bank. And I think we can go forward without touching that too, and still sweep into that as we go forward. The ARPA Revenue Replacement Fund is $10 million. That is just sitting in the bank. We do have that slated. That was offset expenses and was an allowance that was allowed by ARPA. We made a separate fund for it, and we have plans for that, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Then the ARPA fund, we still are sitting on that money. There's $14.3 million in that account right now. So those two accounts, though, are going towards our major construction projects this next fiscal year. So, and we'll talk about those down here in a little bit. Expected holdback is 10%. That the total is like 13.8 million. So really, I consider that that is the buffer. The state law is required. You're supposed to hold back 10%. So the treasurer, he carry over projected new revenue total, and then he takes 10% of that. That's just to save us from not getting it spending too much. So that's like a savings account too, or working capital, or however you want to call it. So that's kind of where the revenue is, and mostly I just want to tell you all that because just to realize we're in a good fiscal position, in my opinion. The next section there, we have major expected expenses and liabilities. I just threw liabilities in there because I have looked at liabilities. The only true debt that this county has is $6.7 million. It was a deal for Johnson Controls, and they were doing something with hooking up the HVAC systems and making them more efficient and all that kind of stuff. It was an $8 million in the beginning, $8 million debt. So we've made payments on it, but that is the only true debt of the county. We do have some big service contracts that that are just normal, property tax stuff, we'll talk about that, our property insurance, there's some big payments that we make throughout the year. So major expenses this year, of course, the EOC, we're gonna break ground. I think they're talking about October to October, so we're gonna start spending that money. The probable cost was $8.2 million. You guys did 2 ordinances, one for architecture and engineering and one for 4.8 for the construction. The architecture and engineering is in that 8.2. We're probably going to have to find about $2.8 million to finish that project off. The judge has some ideas on that. We can go grant route. We can do different things. So
Yeah, we're still whipping the bushes on that. What I'll say is just our next county services committee meeting next month, we're gonna have our architect team come in and really present this. They're ready to show you guys some walkthrough stuff and some final renderings and stuff like that. So we can have a more detailed discussion probably then on that project, but yes, sir.
And I think Commissioner Johnson too, he's working with the contractors right now, the contract management construction. And those figures might change a little bit, I think, just based on cost and things like that. But I believe he's a good person to have in that seat because he's pretty aggressive and he knows construction. And the meeting I did have with Nabholz, when they came in the room, they gave Commissioner Johnson a lot of respect. And he knew, he speaks their language, and so I really think that it's good that we do have a building commissioner when we got these 2 major projects going on. Of course, the other one is the detention center, the COVID disease mitigation. Probable cost of that is $18.8 million. There was 1 ordinance done for $8.8 million. That right now is where partly going to come out of that ARPA Act fund. The 10 million revenue replacement goes towards that too. So that's how that 18.8 million is going to get paid for. The other big one that we're going to talk about later, one of the big rocks that we've been working on hard, is the compensation plan. We're trying to get a new countywide compensation plan that's more fair and equitable for everybody. We're going to go into that in major detail here in a little bit. But right now, the cost, just trying to make everything fair, we're experiencing budget creep, but we're trying to keep it down. We originally started at $3 million, and we're talking maybe 3.5 to 4 million, but we are also discussing where we might cut in other areas. We're going to go back and sharpen our pencils to see if we can make that blow not so difficult. If you look there, our current labor cost, if we end at 115 million, is between 48% and 50%. If we add on that, I put 3.5 in there, it would take us to about 50 to 52%. So I'm still comfortable with that level, being around 50% of your budget is your labor. Is there any questions on this?
We do have a couple questions that have accumulated if we just want to take a break and answer some. Justice Rio Stafford?
Thank you, Judge. On the revenue, can you remind me, what part of the pie of the revenue comes from property tax versus sales tax?
That would be...
Just roughly.
Treasurer, can you help me out with that?
Well, for general fund, it's, I think 23 million comes in. What I'm projecting, sales tax would be more like 7 million. So 30 million between the two.
30 million between the two, but the majority on the property tax side.
Yes.
Okay, okay. And then on the, thank you. And then on the surplus, the general fund reserve, which is standing about 14.9 million. What's a good number to have in there? Like, is there some, because I know that's on top of the holdback, right? And it's a little higher than what the holdback is. Is there some kind of rule of thumb in the accounting world of what the, what that, you know, surplus reserve should be?
Yeah, and the government, I'll have to do some research and get back with you on that, I will.
I definitely don't want to speak for Treasurer Hill, but in our conversations
Yeah.
before, we always kind of had a mental target of 10 million. But
Okay.
I mean, that is really just a, like, how bad can things get? You know, how much of a cushion do we
Sure.
want there? That's a really swag, if
I
you
mean,
will.
basically, that's, on 115 million, that's about 10%, because
Okay.
really the carryover with the interest that's gonna come in on that is gonna be 15 million to carry over, so it's growing, because we do get interest on that too. I think there's like 300,000 in interest that's projected over the next.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Justice Fleming?
You was talking about the liabilities.
Yeah.
Is the road department liabilities figured in that?
When you say liabilities,
When we got expenses, because I know we got 13 road graders we pay so much a month, and I know we got new dump trucks we
that
pay
is
so much
not
a
in
month.
that 6.9 million, but I do have a chart that I could give you that has all of, everything over 100,000, I'm tracking on how much we bought and how much is left. So that would be one of those big service contracts.
So that's money outside of what you're talking about in
That's
the general
correct,
fund.
correct.
So
correct.
road department's a little separate then?
Excuse me?
Can we get numbers for the road department as well? What we
Sure.
owe?
Sure.
Because I think our deficit's bigger than 6.7 million.
Sure. With the service contracts, yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Justice Simons?
Thank you, Judge. And thank you for bringing this up. This is a great snapshot. You know, in my 4-year tenure here on the court, the county has made some leaps and bounds from where we started 4 years ago. And I appreciate the financial stewardship that this court and the administration has seen us through. This county has had some unexpected big expenses and obstacles and challenges that we've faced head on, and I think we've done a pretty good job financially. We've got some big projects and big opportunities ahead of us. I don't want to get too comfortable with the safety net that we've created for ourselves, because it doesn't take too many years back to see how quickly we can get ourselves in some pretty hot water. We've seen some razor-thin margins, and we've seen this county get in a really tight spot financially. So it's great to see these surpluses and these, you know, revenue projections looking so strong, and property taxes, but there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward. We have some very large projects, multiple large projects. We've got obstacles with state funding, county assets. Now we have big construction projects. We have a new administration coming in. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the financial world with interest rates and things like that. So I love seeing a strong financial report, but I'm super, super conservative fiscally to look at, and it's great to be in this position. We don't want to unnecessarily hole up money and never use it, but man, I'm coming from 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we were in a completely different situation than this. And so it's taken a lot of hard work, and I think our county employees have seen that we've tried to make them a priority. But man, there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward. So I'm glad to see these surpluses, but I'm a little reluctant to get too comfortable and start thinking, hey, let's loosen up the purse strings, because it doesn't take much to flip the script, as it were.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Justice Ricker?
The numbers on the bottom, the current labor costs and the new labor costs and percentages, do those include the vacant positions, or are those just for the employees?
That is straight cash flow.
Just straight what we're paying
Yeah,
out now?
yeah, what we're
and
paying
what
out.
we estimate we'll be paying out. And since we're not paying out for the vacant positions, we're sweeping that back in?
Correct.
Okay.
And I have a potential budget change request, which we'll talk about next on that subject.
Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. I heard you just say that the county-wide compensation program, does that mean that we won't have the sheriffs and the detention and the enforcement step plans that we have now?
That's correct, if it gets passed.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna discuss that in great detail. But what we've been working very hard to do is bring all the county employees under one county compensation plan. And you get to see the details of that in just a second.
Okay.
Is that good for now? We want to let Comptroller continue, or more questions?
Okay, so the couple of budget control accounting changes that I would like to see take place, and one of them involves the salaries for vacancies. Because really what's happening is we're counting on those vacancies sort of as working capital moving through there. It creates a little buffer that allows things to be done, and it's not a true picture. So kind of what I would like to do is what I call an unfunded requirement. So I would request that if somebody has a lot of vacancies, that they put zeros against maybe half of those, or let's just say a third of those. And we acknowledge, the quorum court acknowledges as a body, it is a requirement, but you need to fill the ones that we have funded first, and then come back to us and talk about putting more money against those requirements. And then what that would do, first of all, it would allow us to use that money elsewhere. We wouldn't be sweeping $4 million back annually, because that's about what we're going to do this year. And it's just a more accurate, what it does is it reduces the unnecessary salary sweeps, and it really aligns the budget with true cash flow a little bit better, because right now we got a buffer in there of about $4 million. So, and that would be basically the quorum court's decision as a budget control to do that. And what's your decision? So is there any questions on how that would work? Or it's really putting the zeros against them. You're acknowledge it, that's a requirement. If you get filled up on the ones we've funded, then come back and we'll give you a little bit more.
Justice Lyons?
Thank you, Judge. Just clarification, I agree, I like the idea. Just to clarify, it sounds like what you're saying is not put zero against all the vacancies.
No.
But each department needs to analyze, what are the ones I really need to fill, and I'm gonna try to fill, and I have a high probability of filling.
Correct.
Populate those with the salaries.
Yep.
Everything else that you've been trying to fill for 20 years and you haven't been able to, for one reason, and then we need zero those out.
Correct.
Am I
That's right.
understanding correctly?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. I like the first part because I want to make sure we're planning. I want to make sure our departments are looking forward into the year of what I need, what do I need to do, and putting it into their budget. And then the changes come into something's changed that causes us to have to do something else, or in the case of this is what I planned for. Man, I was much better than I ever thought I would, and now I need these, and we need to come back to it. So it kind of is a change. So in my mentality, budget, and then we authorize beyond that for things that have changed since we did the budget together. Thank you.
Justice Simons?
Thank you, Chair. One concern I've come up with is the time element of the hiring process and making those funds available. If it's a requirement to come before the quorum court to approve those funds, and that further inhibits the department heads from bringing on new people in a extremely timely manner. How do we work around that?
Well, you could be conservative, that's where I said half originally, maybe you do a third, start small or something, but even a third of $4 million is quite a bit of money that we're, you know what I mean? So, and then come back before you're totally filled up, you know what I mean? If a department sees it filling up and saying, we're doing pretty good on recruiting this year, like, don't wait till they're all filled and then come back,
Sure. And I guess this would be the responsibility of the court to be mindful of what that total figure could be and not get too spend happy and allocate funds and not have that buffer of, as we as a county continue to grow, and if we get into a position where we don't have large number of vacancies, I'm thinking about Sheriff Cantrell's report, we're 31 shy in the detention center, that's not a great place to be.
Right.
But if we get back to a point where we're back competitive and we have, no vacancies or single digit vacancies, are we going to be prudent and diligent enough to hold back funds to be able to fill those positions easily and quickly and not be sitting here like, well, we made this change and we said we were going to do this, and now we're needing to hire people. We don't know where the money's going to come from.
Yeah, I haven't looked back on how many years this has occurred, but I have a feeling that it's occurred multiple year after year after year. I mean, it's really just over budgeting, in my opinion. So. But I get what you're saying. Okay. The next one there, the next one is just really an accounting issue. For example, property tax. Our premium on property, insurance, sorry. Our property insurance premium is $1.1 million, and that insures about $160 million in buildings and real assets. We did scrub that list this year when we got that quote, and we took off multiple things that were on that list that we did not think needed to be on there. Some old metal buildings that probably were overvalued just because of square footage, some towers that we had on there. So we were able to lower our premium by $40,000 on that. But the way we're doing that right now is we allocate that premium over every department, which is kind of silly accounting-wise to me. I always use the example of the legal department had $5 allocated to it out of that 1.1 million. That is just the accounting process that the comptroller department has to go through. What I would like to do instead, and you'll see the budgets change a little bit because of that, because I want to do the same thing with software. What I want to do is if you have a revenue stream, like the jail has a revenue stream, put the buildings that under their control, under that jail fund, they still will pay part of the premium. The roads is the same way. They have their own fund. So that building, the premium for that building, we'd still put under there. Everything else, we'd put under buildings and grounds because that's who manages our buildings. Software is a good example on HR. Our new HR software is about $160,000. Well, people budget in their budget for how many employees they have, and they do that across every department. So what they do is they call the comptroller department and they say, hey, what should we budget in this for that, And really, it's kind of just hiding the true cost of what the software is. And it would affect my department because I'm like, just give me the whole, finance enterprise system instead of doing this accounting where we're bringing it across every different department. The other thing that does, it gives you guys a clearer picture of how much it's costing. Because if you break it out over how many ever departments we have, 70, 80 departments, you don't even see the true cost of it. So those are two budget controls that I would like to change going into this next year.
I want to be selfish and warn you guys. The reason he's covering this is when you see these budgets, it throws us off, right? I mean, you can understand if we've broken this up in previous years, all of a sudden the comptroller budget's going to look like it skyrocketed. But it's because we're just trying to consolidate this, and what comptroller's saying, at some point it gets silly with all the labor to just break these up to all these different departments. I mean, it's still coming out of the same bucket. It's all taxpayer funds, and so we just want to try to put these in one bucket and just be done with it, instead of everybody putting all this labor into breaking these up in some insignificant de minimis amounts.
I mean, we could do that all day long with buildings and grounds. You could say, you got this much square footage, so I want to allocate my salary towards you guys, or, you know, it's just an accounting process.
Justice Lemming?
That, being just talking about that software, the best I could figure is about $500,000. Was that not about right?
The new HR software is about $160 a year, I think.
I think he's talking about what the difference between implementation and, I mean, there's some, yeah, there could be differences there. Justice Pond?
Yes, I'd really kind of like to just touch on why that budget was all scattered out between all the departments, where we had a time years back where the IT department was really picked on a lot, and we had some JPs seemingly trying to be fiscal conservatives that they just ripped that IT budget to pieces, and then the IT department could not, they couldn't provide for all the different departments they had to serve. And so, okay, what I'm saying is the reason it's like
Right.
this is some bad kind of politics.
I'm tracking.
Thank you.
On that same subject, I would say that I believe that we should invest in IT. I kind of feel like when I came here, I went about 10 to 20 years back, and I think that the IT director will agree with me. So.
Justice Rio Stafford?
Well, I think JP Pond kind of answered my question, because it was going to be about why did we start doing it this way in the first place? It was just, we've just been doing it because we've always done it that way. It sounds like we were trying to get around some issues at some point in the past. But I'm all for, I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, what he's saying is it helps transparency. It helps transparency in government to know how much we're spending on these different items. Justice Lyons?
Yeah, I agree. I like it because it gives you a better view of the cost. I remember last year's was my first budget cycle, and that was one of the questions I had all this HR software, all, you know, what the heck is this in the dog pounds budget, right, for all these licenses and stuff. It just didn't make sense. But in the IT realm, you talked about software. Are we talking major centralized software? I mean, when we, you know, normally in business, when we are looking at desktops, the things that are tied directly to the employee, a lot of times they get charged back to the department because they didn't take the cost of their employees, the things they need for their employees, thereby offsetting a little bit, possibly, the issues that we were talking about earlier. Is that the thought process, or is that all
Yeah,
IT costs are going to be in IT?
I'm talking about major softwares and system-wide softwares. Like, I really consider those consumables.
No, yeah,
you know,
that's
in
fine.
the IT world.
Just because I see that as, you know, if somebody plans to hire 4 people, they should have in their budget the equipment for those 4 people.
Correct.
Right? And then that way they get the materials they need to do their job, right? We talk about HR software, financial software that's bigger across the board.
Right.
Than, yeah, centralizing that makes much more sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, the final one, and this is just, this was brought up to me a couple times, and I am a proponent of the justice, you guys getting paid more per meeting. You're the 3rd largest county. We're the 3rd largest county in Arkansas. I've arrayed all the fees from top to bottom, and you're the 4th from the bottom on getting paid, $200 a meeting. I propose that we raise it to 300. If we raised it to 300 a meeting, you'd still be in 40th place, and you'd be tied with 10 other counties for the deal, for what they're making when you array all the counties. One of the things about this is we actually budget right now the maximum amount that a justice can be paid. This past year, it was like 18.5. That's what we put in salaries in the quorum court. Well, most of you guys know you never get to that 18.5. Even with the 300, you won't get to the 18.5, and we could move some of that money down to training, so you can go to the county associations and all that kind of stuff. So I just know that that can be a sticky subject. I'm a proponent of it. I think that when you're the third largest county, you shouldn't be fourth from the bottom when you're making 100 decisions on $115 million annually. So that's just food for thought. We'll present that to you later. We're not requesting any, input or anything unless you got input.
Justice Lyons.
No comment on that. Just overall, what's the plan here? These are proposals, are these coming back to us to vote on? Do we,
These are just information.
information?
Yeah.
But this is what I don't have any issue with all this.
This is just basically laying the groundwork to enter the budget season. This is kind of the.
But the plan
front end.
is, your plan is to implement these.
Right,
But
yeah.
you don't need anything from us to do that. And I'm fine with that. I'm just
Yeah.
making sure.
Now, when it comes
These
to-
will be items that you will need probably to take action, so definitely some of these. But we just want to introduce this to you so you can start thinking about it, so that when we get to that point, you can be a little bit more educated and have time to do some research on these different items.
I would foresee the budget controls coming at the same time the budget does. Like the final budget, because, there's gonna be all sorts of movement, negotiation over the next 2 months. And what I would like to see is we'll send you those spreadsheets. You guys can dig into details. You can call us and say, hey, come explain this to me, or we need to try to get better in these arenas and go from there. I would like a more educated vote at the final budget process.
Any final questions or comments about this information?
So back on, now we're back to, this is actually in the agenda. The spreadsheet, the gigantic spreadsheet for me is too complicated. Like, I like to look at things and bring it, where it's just basic and we're talking overall numbers. I don't like to dig down unless we see a big increase in something or a big decrease. And these numbers are preliminary. Everybody has submitted their budget. But like I said, on this comp plan, we're gonna go back and say, hey, can you sharpen your pencils? Can you wait on certain things? Or if we see that the unappropriated reserve is really small, we might go back and say, hey, you might wanna hold off on some of your capital deals until we see what happens next year. So the reason why I'm doing this is because this is sort of how I'm gonna function going forward, bringing you the overall budget. If you see on the back page there, it has the 2024 budget was 114 million. And this year, right now it's sitting at 127, but 10 million of that is that ARPA revenue replacement fund that we have to budget to spend on the COVID mitigation and the EOC. So that's where, if you took that 10 million out, and that's really a wash because we have it there, but we're gonna spend it, it would have been 117, which is a 3.2% increase over last year. So last year's budget was 114 million, and then 117 plus that 10 million in ARPA funds. The 14 million in ARPA funds that is in the grant system now, that carries over in the grant system on an ordinance, and that's the appropriation for that. So I did a quick calculation. If we put the STEP program in there at 3.5 million, because that'll adjust these numbers some, and it won't all be it won't be a total of 3.5 million because we're negotiating with some prior ordinances that were already negotiated as far as salary goes. So, but that would probably be worst case scenarios. 6.42 million, 6.2%. And then on the bottom there, you just see the same, I've already explained the, how we're gonna pay for the COVID mitigation at the jail and the EOC. Now this next one, that's the effect on county general. There should be one that has county general. So if you go down to the bottom there, county general is actually going down 1.4%. So it's 780, right now it's 789,000 less than last year that we're budgeting. Some of that is because of buildings and grounds. We had, I forget, it was like 5 million in insurance money to redo the roofs. And we did the roofs and all that money was allocated. So that's a big, you see that the buildings and grounds is down 2.6 million. But county general, the purpose of that is just showing you that it's actually going down. Then this next one is the one that most of the time you guys are focused on, that shows the unappropriated reserves. Some of these are still changing. The insurance fund is one of them. That figure, you see that the unappropriated reserve is negative right there. We're going to talk with Mr. Angel and see that I think the increase there you see, I'm not sure what that increase is, projected. I'd have to look back on the other budget, but that's a pretty big increase. It's like $1.5 million, I think. So we're going to figure out what we need to do there with Mr. Angel and HR and the judge and go from there. I think the reinsurance definitely helps us out in that arena right now. The way we fund that is $645 per slot. I kind of want to get away from paying per slot because we're paying vacancy slots. Really, so that it doesn't give us an accurate figure, even though Mr. Angel comes and tells us the per member per month, which is that's the way they talk in the health insurance business. We could get close to that, funding it the same way, and then we would have a more accurate figure on how much it's costing us per person. Is there any questions that stand out on that one? It's all preliminary. So the next step on the budget is after we talk about the compensation plan and we figure out exactly where we are money-wise and put that, right now we've been working a budget, what you see right there under the old plan if it was just status quo and everybody went forward. We also got one simultaneously that we're working on the step plan. So once we get a pretty good thumbs up on the step plan, we could give you those figures and go from there. And I will probably be pretty aggressive over the next 2 months communicating with you guys. And however you like to communicate, just let me know if it's via email or have me come to you, or if you come to the courthouse and we can discuss the budget process further, the actual numbers. So I'm ready to get into the step plan.
I want to comment on that first before we jump in here.
Okay.
I know a lot of you have been briefed on this. I want to say that this gets to be a very sensitive subject within the county. I think any of you that have been on the quorum court know that this could become very contentious within compensation. I want you all to know that I think a lot of you have been briefed on this plan. The team has put a lot of hard work into that. I want to thank the sheriff for their team basically negotiating with us and trying to help us get there. I also want to say that this is a work in progress. And, you know, we're up against, we want to keep our workforce informed about what we're trying to do and keep you guys informed. And so this is what this is. I really want to caution everybody. I think this is a wonderful thing. I'd love to see the county get here. I think it would be absolutely historic to get us back under one compensation plan. But please respect this process is what I'm trying to say. We can't let misinformation or rumor derail this. This is too important for the workforce. I spent a lot of time on the quorum court trying to get the work when I was even in doing the budgets. And I always said we'd put the employees first, and we never did. And it's been one of my largest regrets. And so with that, I want to turn it over to the team, and let's listen and learn, and hopefully we'll get something very positive in front of our workforce so that we can start carving on it.
Okay, like the judge said, basically, the compensation plan, really the attempt is to make it fair and equitable across the entire county for every employee. And the other thing that it'll do is it'll make our budgeting process a little bit easier, knowing where people are falling, and more predictable. And like the judge said, this is a work in progress. We've been briefing everybody. We briefed all the directors. We briefed all the elected officials. We briefed some of you guys. And we've listened to everybody's concern, and we're trying to take that into account, and we're also trying to make it fair, but we're also trying to make it affordable. Because when you start talking about unfairness, it always involves increasing something. So that is causing budget creep a little bit, which we are addressing and trying to rein in as much as we can. So one of the problems is the current process of giving raises, as you guys know, it really involves regrading the position, going to JSAP, and really that person is sitting in the same seat doing the same job, and then they go regrade it by however you regrade it on the job description and try to bump it up. So if you look at that on the back end, first of all, that process is tedious and inconsistent. And then if you look at it on the back end, the raises are all over the place. You know, so certain people get a certain amount, certain, people that might not be more aggressive for their folks, they might get left out. They don't, and people that know the system are good at working the system, more aggressive, their people might get more. So that's kind of what we're trying to combat. And right now we have 7 compensation plans in the county. The sheriff has 4. The roads has 1. Election Commission has 1. And then the rest of the county's on a plan. And what we're trying to do is get everybody on the same plan. And it's really using the existing grading structure that our HR already uses. They had a lot of discussion with the sheriff's department on how we can fit them in to our plan and also somewhat honor the raises that the ordinance has in the past we're going to give them in the, this coming year. So we've been working with that, negotiating with them, and the sheriff's on board and trying to negotiate with us and also make sure that his people get what's fair to them. So I think we're close there. So I'd say that if you look at it in retrospect, those facts of how we do raises, I would say it's not fair right now. A lot of people get left behind. So that's what we're trying to combat with this plan. So what we did is we're going to use a step program, and we laid those steps onto our current grading system. So the way we did that is we looked at the maximum pay for each grade. We had to add 5% so we didn't go below step 1, and that is step 10. So that's where you would max out. If you got that job and you're graded at a certain level and you come in 10 years, each year you would get a 5% bump as you went on. And so in 10 years, you would max out. If you maxed out, then you would be having to look for, you would have to get promoted and get a new job in a different grade. And then you might go into, you'd probably go into a lower step, but at a new grade. So you'd be guaranteed 5% going to the new grade. So does everybody understand that about how a step system works? Basically, and the concept is when you come up on your anniversary date and we're still in discussion about what anniversary date we're gonna use, whether it's a position date or hire date in the county. When you come up on your anniversary date, theoretically, HR will send your supervisor a email that'll say, hey, this person is up for the next step. If you agree, you really don't have to do anything because it's assumed. If you think that member should not get a step promotion, then you need to take action and also give documentation on why the member does not deserve a step promotion to HR. So it's assumed you're going to get one, but it's still up to the supervisor. So they'll get the email. If the person's performing satisfactory, they check box, and boom, they get their next 5%. So what that does too, it gives a person coming into the county, right now there is no clear path on their salary. They don't know what it's going to be, but they can look at this step program that's laid out in steps, and they know, okay, this is where I'm going to be in 3 years, this is where I'm going to be in 4 years, this is where I'm going to be in 5 years. And then in theory, in 26, instead of the way it is now, when you look now, raises are all over the board. Some people get 15, some people get 10, some people get whatever. Everybody will be 5, from the highest paid employee to the lowest paid employee, percent. The one thing about getting onto this program, our lowest paid employees are getting the most in this program. So we got the janitorial staff is a good example. They're just getting onto the step plan. It's bringing them up, I think, 10 to 15%. And what that does right now, too, we're also outsourcing some of our janitorial staff because we can't keep them because the pay's so low. So we're going to give them a couple of $1 bump, and hopefully we'll be able to fill that more because, as you know, temp agencies put a premium on when you're using temp agencies. The other one is 911 operators. They're going to see a jump pretty significantly. So we do see, getting onto the plan here, the lower paid employees are getting bigger jumps. So the other thing is no employee will go backwards. So where you are right now, when we look at you and grade you out, if we look at your current pay salary, then we go see where you fit in the step plan, you don't drop back. If you're in the middle, you actually move forward. So it adds a little bit of a percent depending on where you are in that gap between where your current pay sits in the step plan. So nobody goes back, everybody goes forward. Let's see. People can also, and as we go on this, that situation right there, people will be at different steps, you know, in their graded system. So some people, if they're already getting highly paid, they might be out here at a step 7, and then they have 3 steps to go. If you're lower paid, according to where we think your minimum should be, there's a lot of people that are below the minimum. They're jumping on to the first step, and then they got 10 years to get increases. So I really think that this plan helps out the lower paid employees and gets them, you know, a fair and equitable route forward. And so, let's see. And then what we can do, it makes it more predictable. So we can look at, we know that it's probably going to be a 5% jump across the board on labor. If our revenue, if our revenue is booming, like, and we think it might be, but we can evaluate it, then you can make a decision on COLAs. One thing about a COLA will shift the whole chart. And everybody, a COLA should be countywide. A COLA should not be by department. There's actually, I think, some departments here in the plans get a COLA now. It's written into the ordinance. A COLA should be countywide. So it's after you're done, I think the federal government this next coming year is talking like they're gonna do 2.6% or something like that, 2.8. But if we can evaluate, I think on this first year, because everybody's getting bumps, we're assuming that it's a 0% COLA going forward this year, because we're already gonna dump, a decent amount of money to getting everybody on the step plan, getting them raises. I already talked about in the beginning, so this first year, getting on the plan, the raises will be all over the place, but in theory, everybody will be treated fair and equitable in the out years going forward. So really, the primary goal, again, is fair and equitable across the county, provide our employees with a clear compensation path, because right now, the compensation path is kind of unknown when you come in under the current system. It's more efficient, and the promotion and raise process is more efficient, and then also streamline the budgeting process. We did bring the spreadsheet, if you actually want to dig in and see a little bit of the spreadsheet, or if you have any questions you might want to fire towards me, and I may have to ask HR and the IT director, because that's who we've been working on.
I got a couple statements, and then we'll probably open it up to the questions and the team. Guys, our compensation program right now is completely broken, and you can see that by how many people are sitting in the first quartile, basically on the minimums, just riding that minimum up. And so we don't have something that's working right now, is what I would want you guys to understand and try to help us with. Is no matter what we do, the county compensation plan is the one I'm talking about right now. Also, one thing I'm gonna say is I've become a trained believer in the STEP plan, and especially in the public service environment. We've seen great success with that in the road department in terms of making it a recruiting and retention tool. And what I would like for you guys to consider, it's a commitment between us and the employees. We're making a promise to them that if they come, they can see their future ahead of them. Director Baird said it one time. He said the employees don't see what they're going to make. They see what they'll make in the future. They see that commitment. They see their careers laid out in front of them. And I think that's what I would like for Washington County to be, a place where somebody can come and see their future and their possibilities in the future and spend their careers here. That's where I think the taxpayers get the best benefit. And so I've seen this work. And I'd also like to say that public service is moving more in this area. We sit on the board of Central EMS. Last year they passed a step pay plan, and they've seen their ranks really grow in a challenging hiring environment. So just keep all that in mind. Justice Simons, you got a question for us?
Thank you, Chair. Comptroller, can you speak to the mechanism? You were talking about these steps and the eligibility. I know we've discussed this kind of at length. But I want the public and the rest of the quorum court to hear the mechanism by which the employee, it's not subjective whether or not they get approved or disapproved. It's not necessarily your supervisor or the department head gives you a yay or a nay, but it's based off performance reviews. And
that is correct.
Can you speak a little bit more to that for clarification?
Yeah, the main thing is if a supervisor says that, no, I don't want this person promoted because I don't think they're performing properly, then they need to provide documentation. There should be evaluation saying, if there's performance plans, there should be documentation saying, yeah, you're not performing well. It should not be a shock to the employee. And the supervisor should be able to back it up with documentation. And that's one thing the judge has been on lately is everybody needs to start, whatever your evaluation system is, and most people are using the same one, you need to evaluate your people, whether you do it at least annually. Probably you should be talking to them at least once a month, or you should be documenting something once a month, even if it's not formal. But you should do a formal evaluation at least once a year. And that gets submitted to HR. And then when a supervisor denies a step promotion, then, it can be backed up. So that takes the subjectivity out of it.
sorry, I hit the button. It takes the subjectivity out, but it still gives our elected officials, the department heads, the leeway of choosing what that performance review looks like, whether it's attendance, it's metrics hit, goals, whatever. So that might not be across the board the same department from department, but the step plan would be contiguous across the board.
Correct.
Thank you.
We want elected officials and to, maintain their, I guess, sovereignty, for lack of a better word, because different departments, as you can understand, might have different metrics that they want to measure and performance, so that we want to give them the flexibility to continue to do that. And I just want to comment for myself personally, if we ever got to the point where somebody was not, assuming this plan passed, was not awarded their step, that would be a big deal, I would think. That we've failed as a county at a certain point, right, of making sure that now, I mean, if the person's not performing and won't perform, that's a whole nother issue. But what I'm saying is this gives us a mechanism to make sure we're giving them the training and the performance improvement plans, if they need one, to get that step. This is not intended for arbitrary people to be denied their step. This is meant to promote everybody, get everybody moving forward. Justice Lyons?
Thank you. When we met, and I appreciate everybody's work in this and the time you spent with each of us to help us understand this. But I was surprised. I did not realize that, if I understood it correctly, if I'm hired in at the first quartile, there's no way I can get out of that. There's no way I get a raise unless I get regraded or promoted or something else. You're stuck there with the exception of COLAs. That just literally, I wondered, and this was a conversation I had with Director Burchett, what's this regrading thing? Why are we regrading all this stuff? And this is exactly why we get all these regrades coming in year after year after year, because that's the only way elected officials and supervisors have to reward their people in raises, okay? So I like this because it gets us out of that process, which, to your point, it really does leave it not equal across the board. People get left out and that type of thing. Can you talk a little bit about the transition into this? Because if I remember correctly, like you said, when we first instantiate it, some people are going to get bumps because of getting them up to the point they need to be at to start, right? But then you start having, if the steps are based on hire date, then you start having hire dates starting January, February, March, et cetera. So what is that transition date so that we're fair across the board?
Yeah, one of the things, and this was feedback from some of the directors and elected officials. So getting on to the plan, there are some people that what we're saying right now is if you're below 5% of a raise, getting on to the plan, you can get your next step in 2025. If you're above 5%, getting on to the plan, because there's a lot of people that are above 5%, the percents are all over. If you're above 5%, your step's gonna kick in 26. So in theory, you can't get a big bump January 1, and then your anniversary date's February, and you get another 5% bump. So that was our way of keeping that cost down. Now, one of the things that we have entertained, and we're probably gonna do it, which costs a little bit more money, but it's also fair and equitable. There's some people that get pretty minor raises getting onto the system, and oh, by the way, their anniversary date is in December. So they might get, let's just say, for numbers purposes, a dime, very small, less than 1%. And then their anniversary date until December. But what I've said I think we should do is, for those particular people, we need to come up with a cutoff if it's in the last quarter or the last half of the year, and we're doing those calculations now. Those people will be moved to the next step immediately in January. So they would get at least that 5%, and then their anniversary date next year is when it would kick in, not so.
Justice Hires?
Thank you, Judge. I just wanted to, I don't know about the rest of you, but I might be the only person that works in a environment where I do public service and I'm on a step plan. And I'm very fond of the idea because I've worked the same job for 18 years, and part of the reason I've devoted the last 18 years to that job is I can see where it's going. I'll probably stay there till I retire. And it's all laid out for everybody, and there is a level of equitableness. And we still, even in public schools, have this situation where if we're not doing our job, I just don't get a contract, you know? So like that's still, and there's a lot of procedures that go into that. But just as someone who has spent the last 18 years working with a step plan, just gonna say I'm a big fan. I think that it's equitable, it's transparent, it's fair, and I'm really like the idea. Thanks.
You know, I think there's something to be said too, that just like you, there could be people who have roles they're very fond of in the county, and right now they're stuck. And so if you find a role that you like in the county, I'd like for you to have 10 years of raises laid out in front of you to make sure if you're performing well and you're doing your part for the taxpayers, we're rewarding you too. So yeah, it's absolutely a balance.
Now, one of the things that's also come up is sustainability. You know, I can't tell you it's sustainable in 10 years. I can tell you it's sustainable over the next couple of years. And then what happens is if it's not sustainable, we revisit it and we can tweak the STEP program. You know, I mean, you don't have to, the judge always says, don't let great get in the way of good. I mean, this is a good program that we want to get on. And then if we see in a year or two, like, real, this needs to be tweaked, I mean, we can tweak it. One of the things that I've realized since I've been working here is an ordinance is only as good as the next ordinance. I mean, you can pass an ordinance today, and then next week you can change it.
That's when the conversations, of course, get difficult. But what I'd like to say, if we reach an economic hardship or something that would have to drastically change in our economies in this area, I think that's why Comptroller is highlighting some of these things on the front end. But the thing I'll say about that is if we get into that situation, we'll all handle it together. And right now we have several different comp plans, and some people eat it and some people don't. And I don't think that's fair. Any other questions for Comptroller? If not, I'd like to bring Director Burchett and possibly Chief of Staff Stewart up if he'd like to make some comments. I think some of our directors here tonight would like to make some comments on it if you guys are open to that. Did you?
Justice Coger.
Oh, I'm sorry. Justice Coger, didn't see your.
Thank you, Judge. I just had a question about, we were talking about the supervisor does the evaluation. What right does the employee have? I mean, like with a teacher contract, there are appeals and things that they can do. So are you saying that there's no grievance or there's?
I'm assuming that there would be appeal process, right?
You wouldn't do like a grievance process for a performance evaluation. So your performance evaluation should be based on other factors through your employment through the year, such as if you were put on a performance improvement plan or received a corrective action, whether it be verbal, written, or were put on suspension. So all of that kind of stuff would be taken into account when preparing a performance evaluation plan. Yes, a performance evaluation for an employee. And so there is no appeal process to a performance evaluation. I've never seen that done before in government, at least. I mean, now if you get into a termination situation, that's when grievance comes in. So if you would like there to be an appeal process, but I think at that point you're getting into an area with your managers and your electeds where you're questioning their discretion. And I think that you should support your directors and your managers and your electeds whenever they do make a distinction on an employee's behavior. They're there in the day-to-day with that employee. They're observing that behavior. They're observing their work ethic. They're observing what they're getting done and producing. And so when they carry out that performance evaluation, they're doing it on the basis of all those factors. And so I'm not really sure why we would want our employees to be able to appeal a performance evaluation.
Well, I'm not saying that they should. I guess what I'm saying is it just doesn't seem fair that it would be based on one person's decision.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what, they could contest their evaluation, no?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what if they didn't agree with it?
Well, they don't have to sign it and agree to it, but it would still stand. That's the same thing with if you write somebody up. I mean, they don't have to agree with being written up for, I don't know, abuse of sick leave or whatever it may be, but they're still being served with that. That still stands on their record as an official county document and holds merit.
Well, I don't know, I hadn't even thought about it till JP Hire said that about teachers, and I know they have a process, where they can go and appeal, so I was just wondering about it.
Yeah, we haven't considered that and taken that into account in the policy, so no, there's not a method for that right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Justice Lyons?
Thank you. Just to add to Dr. Pacheco, that's just not county, that's industry. There is no appeal process in industry. In 30 years I've been working in industry, we don't have appeal. Now, you do have the conversation with your supervisor, you have the ability to document your view of it, right? But then, what's there is what's there, and there is appeal, it's just not a government thing, that's just a work thing. I work for somebody, they evaluate how I work, how I do my job, and they provide evaluations for documentation's sake, either for raises or other circumstances that come up.
Thank you, sir. Director Burchett, did you want to make any comments on the plan? Do any of our directors want to make any comments on the plan? I didn't know if you guys were here for this. I'm not putting you on the spot at all. I just want to give you the opportunity.
Surprise. Angela, Ledgerwood, Buildings and Grounds. I just want to reiterate what Paul said. For a number of years, comments have been made by people around this group that we need to do something for the people on the bottom. This compensation plan does something for the people on the bottom, and it's good. We had, for the first time, we were going to be fully staffed in janitorial in August. And we had orientation scheduled, and the day before orientation, the guy called and said, I got a job for $1 an hour more. He didn't come. We still haven't filled that position. This compensation plan would have paid him more, and he would be here. So I just implore you to please consider this. It's good for everyone. It's good down the road, as some of you have stated. Please. Puts a lot of consideration into this and plan on passing it.
All right.
I actually will say something.
Okay, Director Burchett.
I think we haven't touched upon recruitment, and I think that that's important for everybody to understand. So one of the big benefits also of this program is that it'll allow our electeds and our hiring officials to be able to negotiate on the front end with their applicants. Up to the third step in whatever that position is classified within. And I think that that is going to be very telling when it comes to our recruitment and retention processes. Right now, Comptroller Sherman did touch upon the fact that in our current graded structure, the mechanism for recruitment and negotiating pay, you have to go through this very cumbersome process of JSAP, and then you go through county services or finance and budget, and then on to quorum court to get that money approved or that increase in pay approved for starting pay. With this program, the money would be there, and the new hire would be able to be negotiated with on the front end, and that hiring official would be able to, in a sense, guarantee, yes, we can give you this, and you're going to get this coming in. Whereas right now, a part of that process is they come in at the minimum, and then we wait to go through the committee process, and then HR is going back once it's approved and figuring retro pay for that individual back to their effective date. So that in itself is also very cumbersome to get that employee the pay that they have essentially been negotiated with at the time they were offered the job, but they didn't start at that pay. They started at a lower pay pending our approval process. So that can be very challenging in itself to even, for us to recruit, but then also for applicants out in the field looking for jobs, like they see that process, they're like, why would I want to go and do that, and have to sit through that when I can go over here to Walmart or JB Hunt or somewhere and know going in, this is what I'm getting paid and I'm going to get that on my first check. So I think that that's a huge benefit as well, and I believe that we will see a huge shift in our ability to recruit and retain valuable employees in the county going forward with this plan. Trying to think if there's anything else that we missed.
You might want to touch on, I'll bring up, Director Burchett, when we first started this process, brought something up to me that I didn't
Fringe benefits?
appreciate.
Okay.
We spend a lot of time and labor in HR doing these processes she just described. Getting these ordinances, back pay, all this kind of stuff. This system will make our compensation extremely predictable. What that does is it allows budgeting to be easier for you guys, what we can expect year to year. But then what it does is it opens up Director Burchett's team to start working on other things for the county that might be beneficial for our employees. And if you want to, I'd like for you to comment a little bit on that.
So, you know, one of the goals in my mind from the get-go with this proposal was let's be proactive about what we're doing in the county instead of being reactive. I have been here for about 3 years now, and I've had the opportunity to watch this horseshoe talk about budget and employee and salaries, and we're going to put employees first. And unfortunately, because of all of the varying differences in our compensation programs, it's very challenging to get a hold on that during budget season whenever we have many other budget concerns going on at the same time. So one thing is to get proactive. And so the ability to get on a step plan will allow us to do that. And it will enable us to start looking at things like what I call fringe benefits. And when I say fringe benefits, I mean things like tuition reimbursement or assistance for our workforce, child care assistance or reimbursement type programs, things that we've never been able to touch upon before in the past because we're always ultra focused on how are we going to pay our employees, what are we going to pay our employees, and how are we going to manage these varying compensation programs that we have existing. So me and my team are excited about being able to delve into that side of HR and to be able to build our benefit program for our employees, which in a sense will also help with recruitment and retention in the long run. I've had many employees come to my office and ask me, like, do we do anything with child care assistance or reimbursement? And unfortunately, right now, the answer is no. We try to direct them to, you know, Department of Human Services because there are some things that being a public sector employee, you can qualify through state programs. But that is a cumbersome process for them to have to go through and apply. So I would like to see us be able to do that and aid our employees in those areas. I will say that some of our sister counties, what I refer to as Benton and Pulaski, they have programs like that already in place. They're already doing that. So in that sense, we're behind. And I don't want us to be behind. I want us to be viewed as the best county in the state. They should be looking to us at what we're doing. And I will say that as far as this STEP program that is before you, this proposal, Benton County and Pulaski County, they have called me and asked me, and they want to see it. Some cities have asked me, they want to see it. Because they are under the old program that our old vendor that was managing compensation in the state, they're still under that old program. We have moved away from that. So we are ahead of the game as far as where we're at preparing our compensation countywide. One of the other things with this proposal that hasn't been talked about is long-term maintenance of it. So we're fitting employees. Employees are classified within their grades right now under what I call the graded structure. We have taken road positions and sheriff positions and market benchmark them and fit them into that graded compensation program that exists right now. And then we overlaid it and turned it into a STEP program. In the future, obviously, market's constantly moving and changing for costs nationwide. So in order to nurture the STEP program, we will have to do, whether it be annual or every 3 years or every year do a third, we are going to have to do compensation analysis on our positions to keep up with the market. So that will be a mechanism that will come to you all if this passes at budget time. You won't be doing it in February, March, June, July, all these random times like you do now with regrading. You'll do it all at once cohesively for the entire county. We'll be looking at it as one whole picture. It won't be piecemealed. So I think that there's a lot of value in that and doing market analysis in that way instead of trying to regrade and get these employees up in the structure. I think I've explained this before that regrades should not be the way that you give raises. It shouldn't be the norm. And usually regrading only occurs if there's a huge structural change in a department. So we should be looking at market. We should be trying to compare to the market. Where we compare to the market, like at what point, that is, you know, a topic of discussion, I guess. But I would recommend trying to be competitive and look at the 75th percentile in market when we're looking at salaries, because we're ahead of where the market is at that point, and we can remain competitive and stay competitive if we're targeting that. If we can afford it. We may have to dial back from time to time. We did touch upon that a little bit, if we get into a hard year. Well, I wouldn't recommend changing the structure of what's being proposed. I would say freeze steps if we got into a hard year. Don't just let employees sit where they're at, or don't do a COLA. There's lots of things that you could do without changing the scope of what's being proposed and before you. Okay.
Justice Leming, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to ask this question because it's been on my mind a lot. If you talk about regrading, would you grade a police officer in Fayetteville, Arkansas better, worse, same as a police officer in Washington County?
Would I grade them?
I mean, how would you grade a Washington County sheriff patrolman that goes out on calls versus a city of Fayetteville patrolman that goes out on calls?
So I will start off by saying cities and counties are different.
No,
You
a
can't
police officer.
Hold on, please, 1 second. You cannot compare a city to a county when you're talking about compensation. We have different tax revenues. The jobs are different. You are saying they're not, but they are. Our county patrolmen cover a lot wider range than a city police officer, okay? Fayetteville Police Department, they have a different structure and a different step plan that they have going on, and it's based on what their revenue can afford. I would say that we should not be comparing to them.
Okay, well, how are you getting comparable prices for the Washington County Sheriff's Department?
We're looking at the global market of what a law enforcement officer is in the market in Arkansas.
So a global as in cities, a global as in rules?
Global as in regional. I'm not looking at like cities and counties. I'm looking at the region and what the market is dictating in the region for a value of a patrolman.
Well, I can see that a patrolman from Washington County deserves more pay than any local police officer like Fayetteville. Our officers is out at Bug Scuffle, which is 30 miles from here. He's by himself out there trying to make an arrest. It'll take somebody 30 to 40 minutes to get to him. Here in Fayetteville, there'll be one within 5 minutes of him. So to ask that police officer to go down there and risk his life stopping on a DWI out in these county roads is really risky. That's why a lot of them has a lot of trouble out there at night, weekends. But I think their pay needs to be a lot more than somebody local.
I don't disagree with you, but I also think that we have a staffing issue and a safety issue if we're allowing a patrolman to go and do that type of behavior. So I think there's other factors besides just pay that you have to look at whenever you're looking at that type of comparison.
Okay, then when you compare let's go to a grader operator then, from Washington County versus others. Do you value that one? When you grade that one, do you just choose grading of Northwest Arkansas, or do you grade way down south in Dumas?
So our third-party software that does the market benchmarking is what is carrying out those grading factors. I'm not personally doing that. We have a third-party software that specializes in that, and we're feeding our data into that, and they are telling us where that position falls within the market based on the job family, which is a job classification family. So there's nobody hand-picking or hand-analyzing that. We're feeding it through a third-party software that we've purchased to help us manage this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to a degree, because I know Northwest Arkansas is one of the third richest city in the county in the state of 75, and you go down to Dumas, you go down south, they don't get paid like we get paid here.
Right. Oh, definitely. I came from Southeast Arkansas, so I totally understand.
Yeah,
you don't get paid what we do here.
I mean, it's hard to compare our numbers just in our little corner here rather than the whole state.
Right.
It is difficult. What I'll jump in and, we haven't had this. I think our market studies could be much more robust. I think they could be much more specified. And I think this is some of the work that we could do if we had a plan like this, instead of doing all the ordinances and backplay things. This is something that we could go out and make sure that we're comparing ourselves regionally to other very comparable areas.
We need to do that.
Yep.
Across the whole state.
Absolutely.
Are they gonna be a chart somewhere in the near future to where we can look at and say, we keep talking because I've really pushed for our lower paid employees, and I know a couple of years ago, we pushed a straight across the board raise, and there was a lot of people on the upper end didn't like it at all, and we caught hell about it. And the ones on the bottom, what I was really trying to help, we helped somewhat, but these went higher and these still didn't get much further, so. There's a lot of work to be done, but I'd like to see a chart somewhere that kind of breaks down the 600 employees, what's happening.
Like percentage-wise and who's moving where?
Yeah.
So that's what the spreadsheet is. So that's why we were saying, like, if you all would like to see the spreadsheet, you're one of the ones who didn't get to see it. So we are more than happy to bring that up, and you'll be able to see what you're asking. Yeah, we can do that, definitely.
I definitely want to see it.
Yeah. I will say that converting the sheriff's STEP program and the roads department STEP plan into the graded structure, the goal was do no harm. So we made our best concerted effort to make sure that the maximums that are dictated in the current STEP plans for roads and sheriff, that those were still in existence, and that those employees weren't being harmed and having something taken away from them by going into this program. And I do truly believe that this is the right way to move forward. I think that our employees, once they fully understand this program, they will really love it, because they will get to see, hey, if I come to work and I do my job and I show up, I'm gonna get a 5% on whatever anniversary date we use. And then annually, the Quorum Court's gonna look at COLA, and I may get a COLA every year as well on top of that. So that's a lot more than what our employees have been getting countywide than ever before. So I think that that's a really positive move.
That's a positive move, and that's good to hear, but I'm still hearing from employees, and me and the judges talked about this and argued about it. There is a right to work law in Arkansas. And us Quorum Court members is writing all this stuff, and we're putting in our blue book what we want to. I still believe that an employee needs to be wrote up 3 times before he's fired. You can fire anybody at any given moment, at any given time. And you've got a lot of people that's out there that's working for you that's scared of that. And I'm not saying take the right to work law out of the book. I'm just saying leave it in there. But in our policy say, hey, we can write you up 3 times and you're out the door.
So you're referring to a policy of progressive action, which I do not disagree with you. I think that we should be doing our due diligence to our employees and trying to do that. However, because we are an at-will state in Arkansas, you can't change that law unless you go to legislation. You know that.
I know that.
However, we don't want to tie ourselves as employers to where if there is something that in my mind is a zero tolerance situation, that employee needs to be removed right away without that progressive action approach. So I don't think that that's a bad thing to have, but I think that we need to be very careful about saying this is how you have to do it every time. Because if you have an employee that's harassing somebody or gets into a fight on work premises, they need to go, most likely, right? I mean,
drugs, alcohol.
Right. There should be some quote-unquote zero tolerance policies. But in the normal, if it's just like job performance, things like that they could be coached and trained on, that corrective action process, that's how that should be viewed. It should not be, and it always gets a bad connotation, but that should be viewed as a coaching opportunity, as our way of trying to retain and groom that employee to where we want them to be. But I know it gets that bad connotation of, oh my gosh, I'm getting fired because I got written up. And so it's a mindset thing, it's a cultural thing. We can get there though. But you all are the Quorum Court, you have the power to implement those policies and to make those set those policies for us. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Chief of Staff?
I got a few things I just wanted to touch on. One of them was like JP Coger touched on earlier about the eval process and them not getting the next step. It's not just the supervisor that has to sign off on that. It would go to that person's supervisor and then also the elected official as well. So there's multiple steps for security to make sure that the employees get their next step, and if they don't, it's a very good documented reason why. Yeah, I just wanted a little bit of clarification there on that. As far as the pay, and you was talking about the patrolman, I've got 13 years working at the sheriff's office, and I've been one of the deputies in Evansville and get that chill run up your spine because your closest backup is in Fayetteville or Elkins or Goshen, and I don't see much of a difference in Washington County Patrol deputies, Fayetteville, Springdale, Elkins, Lincoln, anything like that. A patrolman's a patrolman, and they deserve as much pay as they can get. And that's one thing that we've come back is that we're reevaluating and looking at from where they were last year and what was promised to come out. We're doing our best to try to get everything up there to where they're not going to be losing what they were already expecting. So I hope that answers a little bit more questions as well. They're not coming down a great amount at all from that. So any other questions on that? I've reviewed this and looked over it in great detail the last couple of weeks, and I think this is a great plan. Coming from a step plan at the sheriff's office, it's from the top to the bottom, every employee overall is going to be greatly improving on their pay. Not to mention, it's higher top outs in almost all the areas as well. So instead of like the patrol corporals, they were topping out at step 8. This has given them 2 more steps in their program to continue to get increases for a higher top out pay and 2 more years worth of pay increases. So.
Thank you, Chief. I think we've had some really robust conversation tonight. Continue to digest that and ask questions. There's a couple things I want to say. One, we all see the expense of getting on this plan. And tonight, this is a call to action to all the elected officials. Guys, we need to sharpen our pencils. We need to try to find some savings to try to get into this plan. So if you support this and you think this is good for your people, please review your budgets and do what we can to help out here and get onto this plan. I also want to mention, I was getting some texts here from my team. This is for the audience outside also. The live stream went down for a minute due to technical difficulties. It is back up. If there's I bet everyone was screaming at their computer at that particular moment. If it should, we do also record these, and we'll load that on YouTube, so it should be in its entirety. If you missed part of this meeting, don't worry about it. It should be online. Just slimming.
You're just talking about that's down. I was trying to get on to the website to look at the new planning map, and that's down. That's not
okay.
Up. Can we get, I'd like to get a copy of the new kind of where we are.
Well, yeah, it's not a copy.
Well,
You'll have to get
book.
online. But yes, we'll get with IT and make sure that that's up and try to get that rectified if that's still an issue. Sorry about that. All right, with that, are we ready to move on with the remainder of our meeting? Item number 12. An ordinance de-appropriating surplus amounts from full-time salaries for the various departments and restoring to the unappropriated reserves as required by the 2024 budget controls for the second quarter of 2024. Justice Ricker.
Make a motion to move this to the full quorum court with a due pass.
Motion to move to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by Justice Ricker, second by Justice Pond. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute. Any discussion? I'm sorry, let me slow down a little bit. Okay. Any discussion by the group? Sorry about that. Any public comments on item number 12? Seeing none, have motion to pass to full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by Justice Ricker, second by Justice Pond. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 12 will move to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation. Item number 13, an ordinance projecting revenue and carryover totaling $78,715.70 in the Veterans Treatment Grant and appropriating said amount to the Veterans Treatment Grant Fund for 2024. Justice Lyons?
Make a motion, we pass this on to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation.
Motion by Justice Lyons, second by Justice Ricker. Any discussion by the group? Any public comments on item number 13? Item motion passed to full quorum court with the due pass recommendation by Justice Lyons, second by Justice Ricker. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 13 will move to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation. Item number 14. An ordinance amending the IT budget for 2024 and for other matters pertaining thereto. This is a switch in the IT budget. They had some capital projects this year that they would like to switch those efforts to trying to, what am I trying to say here? I'm just looking on. Director Baird? I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Director Barrett, IT. We're going to move, we're going to purchase 5 servers for the south area, but now we're going to move that to next year, waiting for the EOC to come online, because we're going to use one of the hardened rooms in there as our secondary server location. So we're going to move the money for this year to bring our general ledger and payroll into the cloud. So we're currently on premise, and we're going to move that into the cloud, and that's going to merge with our UKG system, which is going to be primary HR. It's going to feed that cloud to cloud, make us more secure here. How much? The much for the, so we're going to go with implementation costs, it's $138,000, but we've already pre-spent or prepaid for our on-premise system, $48,000, so the delta in that will come from both this hardware purchase and another software that we're going to push off to 2025 as well.
Questions for Director Baird? Director Baird? Motions on the subject? I'm sorry.
Within your budget, or is this?
Yes,
It's just-
IT will be covering the conversion from on-premise to cloud, and then HR will be.
But this ordinance is asking for $75,000 transfer.
Transfer from a level 4,000, which is capital, and I can't move that within my budget without your authorization, so it's gonna go from a 4,000 level account to a 3,000 level account.
Justice Lyons?
Now, I think I'm gonna repeat, I'm sorry, Director, sorry. I think it's the same thing, I just wanna make sure I got it, and I apologize. So really, we're going off premise, so we don't need the capital funds anymore. So you're taking that 75 grand from your capital funds budget and moving it over to your support and maintenance that you're now paying when you're in the cloud. It now becomes an operational fee versus capital.
We're going to be moving that 5 server stack purchase into 2025 when the EOC comes online. So we're not gonna purchase them this year.
Okay.
We wanna use those funds to move to the cloud version of our general ledger and payroll system.
He's redirecting funds currently in his
So
budget.
you were gonna buy servers, you're not gonna buy them now.
We're not gonna buy those till next year.
So you're gonna use this to get into the cloud for the other side.
And they would not be used for the GL or payroll. We're gonna be using it so we can have identical systems, both north and south, for disaster recovery.
Okay, thank you. I make a motion, we pass this on to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation.
I have a motion to pass to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation by Justice Lyons, second by Justice Dean. Any further discussion by the group? Any public comments on item number 14? Seeing none, I had a motion to pass to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation by Justice Lyons, second by Justice Dean. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Item number 14 will move to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation. Item number 15, an ordinance amending the Circuit Court 8 budget for 2024 and for other matters pertaining thereto. Justice Lyons?
So it says that we're needing $11,500 to modify and supplement the cubicles for the juvenile probation officers and interns.
Yeah, I believe we have some people from Circuit Court 8.
Can we just get more context?
Just a
on
little
what that
background on
means?
this would help us.
I'm Taylor Ferguson. I'm Judge Warren's trial court administrator. And yes, we did request a quote for additional cubicles, additional workstations.
Can you pull that closer? I'm sorry.
Sorry. We did get a quote for additional workstations and cubicles, just because we are running a little short on space for our current employees, and we have one vacant position that we still need to fill. And then in the last couple months, we actually lost one of our current workstations. They had to take that out to put in a new door in that area for security reasons. And the quote for the workstations, we actually already have about half of that available in our budget. So the 11.5 that we're asking for is basically the other half of what we need to complete that project by the end of this year.
Okay, so basically you're adding cubicles?
Yes, yeah,
Okay, thank you. I just, this is the way it was worded, sorry.
yeah, that's all we're doing. We're adding cubicles.
So your staff really didn't have a place to sit now, we're just getting them a desk that they can sit at and work
Yeah,
at,
it's kind of
basically.
hodgepodge together.
Right, got it,
yeah.
okay.
We
Yeah, I
just
make
need
a
more
motion, we pass this
workstations.
on the full quorum court to do pass recommendation.
Motion to pass to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation by Justice Lyons, second by Justice Dean. Any further discussion from the group? Any public comments on item number 15? Seeing none, we're going to take up the question. I have a motion to pass item number 15 to the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation. It's getting late for me, guys. To the full quorum court with the due pass recommendation by Justice Lyons, second by Justice Dean. All those in favor? Those opposed? That will move to the full quorum court. Justice Lyons?
I make a motion that we have items 12, 13, 14, and 15 on a,
Consent agenda. I'm not the only one. I'm happy to see that.
yes, that.
Motion by Justice Lyons to add items 12, 13, 14, and 15 to the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Second by Justice Bowerman. All those in favor? Those opposed? Items number 12, 13, 14, and 15 will move to the consent agenda. Item number 16 is a public comment period. We have 12-minute public comment period with a limit of 3 minutes per individual. Public comments.
I'll hurry up and get up here so we can wrap this up. I'd like to call Sherry Main, 15451 Riches Road, Fayetteville. I'd like to comment on the proposed 2025 budget. First comment I'd like for you all to look at and consider is the Environmental Affairs Fund, 1,0702. In 2024, it was budgeted $255,835, and the budget for 2025 is zero. Did this department merge with another department, or is just a depleted department? That's first comment. IT fund, 1000115 has a budget increase of 24%, up $608,071 from 2024 to 2025, and that may be some of the structuring of moving those servers when EOM comes online. I'm not for sure what that is, but I wanted to bring that to y'all's attention. I want to thank the judge and Attorney Lester for starting the enforcement on Whittington Mine with the injunction they filed. I'm asking also to revisit the Hillside Red Dirt Pit that remains on appeal in litigation. The same agricultural exemption is allowing them to operate a commercial dirt pit without a cup. The county residents on Greenboro Road are choking on the dust caused by this dirt pit. They need dust abatement now. Trucks started hauling this morning at 6:15. There's no accountability for the Hillside owner, Bobby Morris. Thank you.
Public comments.